God for that very nice prayer. The worship was beautiful this morning. Thank you for the worship team. It did give me a flashback. So, story time. I'm in Ghana for a crew partnership with IJM. IJM, International Justice Mission, fights human trafficking across the world. We're in Ghana, and we're in the IJM offices, and every day at 10 a.m., they stop what they're doing, and they break for a devotional. They spend a half an hour to an hour, really a half an hour, but sometimes it spills over. And they have a devotional, they sing some songs, and they just recenter their work on God. So I've been to several of these. We travel back and forth to Ghana. It was my second most traveled country that I've ever been to. And so we're there, and this is normal, right? Except for today. That day, instead of having a devotional, what they decided to do was they said, okay, we're just going to go around. There's probably 20 to 25 people in the room. We're just going to go around, and you're going to start, whatever song is in your heart, you're going to start singing. And then we'll join in. And then they had this guy who worked for IGM, Salorm, and he could pick up any song on the piano. Except if anybody knows me, I do not have a song in my heart. I have a book in my head, not a song in my heart. And I had a small panic attack. Because I'm an American in this, as a visitor in this context, and I'm not sitting out. I'm going to try to find a song somewhere. And so I pulled out my phone underneath the table as people are singing, and I'm like, what do we do? What song? Like, How Great Thou Art is my favorite song. So, but I can't start that one. No chance of that. When you watch me, you'll see I don't clap, I don't snap, no rhythm, anybody. I love it when people sing, but I don't got it. I have other gifts. I know who I am. And so I'm like, okay, not How Great Thou Art, no way. So, doxology. Let's go to there. I can start that one. So we had it all this morning. It was just a little flashback of my experience in Ghana. Yeah, it was tough. We're talking about the Psalms, this sermon series before Lent. I want you, if you can, the fireside room is just across the way. That's where the 100 women gather on this Monday night, right? We have a men's group. It's not quite 100. Guys, step it up. It's not quite 100, but it's enough to fill the space, right? And we break into two groups, and one group is young fathers, and they go and talk about, March Madness. What? And you're thinking the basketball tournament, and I'm thinking parenthood. Because the same theme happens in the basketball tournament as in parenthood. You just survive in advance, right? You live to play another day when you have young children. That's all that's required of you. But our book study last fall, we were talking about how to know a person, and one of the ways that you get to know a person and become a good friend, a good spouse, a good son, a good father, all those kinds of things is you have to have a strong sense of yourself and a strong sense of your identity. And so what I did was, because I was a leader and I can do these things, is I made everybody write a poem. 25 men in this church wrote a poem, and on a Wednesday in December, we all recited our poems in front of one another, right? Yeah, right. And I won't list their name on a slide or anything, but I will read the poem that I wrote. Okay? Okay, here's a poem that I wrote. It's called an I am from poem. Some of you are very familiar with this, right? It's what are the important events, the important people, things that have shaped who you are today. And so here's mine. I'm from where a river runs through it, from where Yellowstone is a place and not a TV show. I'm from where there are no stoplights or fast food restaurants, and everybody knew my name and my business. I am from a driver's license when I was 15, where you didn't learn to swim in a pool, and basketball was my life. I am from too many families and not enough family. Where my grandmother made chicken and dumplings, and you could not beat my grandfather in cards, especially pinochle. I'm from divorce, adoption, and divorce again, where I would try to make everyone happy, and it was exhausting. I'm from a good German Lutheran family, where we would go to Sunday school and church every week, and God became personal to me as a freshman in college. I am from a small town in Montana, a broken family, and God slowly putting things back together. Now, why did we write poems? Catholic philosopher Charles Taylor says that poetry connects us to something sacred. It has an ability to put us in a place and connect moments in time. He calls this higher time, which is a little different than ordinary time where we just kind of go about our day from event to event. But higher time connects these moments, important moments in time to us. And this place and these higher moments point to something more. Poetry creates space for our imagination so that we can find ourselves somewhere in the poem. Right? All mediums of art do this, actually. Photography, sculpting, painting, music, film, storytelling, whatever medium of art, they all do this in their own way. They create space for our imagination. Art is a subtle language. It doesn't explain in excruciating detail, and we live in a place that loves detail. It leaves enough unsaid to draw you into its world and create a longing. It can bring back a memory. It can remind you of a hope you once had. It can cause awe or reflection. Or it can just cause us to look for something more, want something more. This is why the book of Psalms is at the center of ancient Israel's life, of contemporary Jewish life, why Jesus quotes the Psalms in the New Testament and the Gospels so often, and why the Psalms have been so important in the history of the Christian church. It's why we have a sermon series on the Psalms during Lent. As we prepare for Holy Week and Easter, we need to be drawn into a world where someone describes their faith in such a way that we can imagine ourselves somewhere in that story about God. So we come this morning to Psalm 63, and the series in Lent is a series on the songs of restoration, the Psalms of restoration, right? Psalm 63 is an interesting one because restoration has not happened. So how do you find restoration in a psalm where your circumstances and the events that are causing some angst and some pressure on you, you're not on the backside of those. You can't look back and say, yeah, okay, I'm restored. You actually have to look to God and say, can you restore me in the midst of these circumstances? So here we are in Psalm 63. It's a psalm of David. David wrote this psalm. Most commentators think that this psalm was written when David was on the run. He has had to flee Jerusalem, and he's in the Judean wilderness because his life is actually in danger. Somebody is trying to kill him. There were 2 times in David's life when this happened, at least 2 times that we know about. The first time was when he was young, but he was the heir apparent to the throne as the king of Israel. And the current king, Saul, was threatened by David's popularity and rising power. The second occurrence was when David's son, Absalom, tried to usurp David from the throne and become king himself. The first happened after David's great victory over Goliath and Israel's victory over the Philistines. The second happened after David's catastrophic failure with Bathsheba and Uriah. Now, most of us won't experience a threat to our life like David did. But we all experience some kind of pressure and difficulty in our lives. We experience suffering and pain. We experience things when they don't just go the way that we think that they should go. Sometimes we experience these because it's something that we did, right? The consequences of something that we did. Sometimes it's the consequences of what somebody has done to us. And sometimes it's just the consequence of living in the world that's gone a little sideways sometimes. What we learn from this psalm, Psalm 63, is that there are no easy formulas for faith. We live, specifically here, in a culture that loves formulas. Right? We're a STEM culture. David's response to God isn't scientific, and it's not legal. It's relational. And no matter what his circumstances, his response is usually similar when he writes the Psalms in these kinds of circumstances. There's a pattern to David's response to his circumstance in Psalm 63, and it is very familiar and roughly has the same pattern as one of our most treasured literary writings in history, Psalm 23. We all know that one. We don't know Psalm 63, but it is basically parallel to one another in David's response to difficult circumstances. Okay, let me just give a little parentheses here. This is just for free. The difference between a formula and a pattern in our spiritual life is roughly the difference between a superstition and a rhythm of grace. I work with athletes a lot. I like to play pickleball. I guess I'm like Michael Scott. I'm not superstitious, I'm a little stitious, right? But we all want a formula to control things that we can't control, right? So when we look for a formula, it's often used to control or predict an outcome. It is something outside of ourselves, and if we can find it, we can use it to control things. That's the beauty of a formula. Often in our spiritual lives, we look for formulas to try to control things that aren't quite in our control. If I just pray the right way, if I just do the right things, if I just confess what I did wrong, then maybe I can control this situation. A pattern of response is a little different because it's within our power, right? We can't control a situation, but we can respond in such a way that brings us nearer to God so that no matter what the outcome is in a particular circumstance, we have a real experience of connectedness to God that will carry us through. This is especially true in a crisis and especially important in a crisis. Whether it's a crisis of faith, whether it's a difficult circumstance, whether it's suffering, experiencing injustice, you just list the crises that we all go through. It's not easy to think of ourselves like this, but we're vulnerable people. We can't control everything, despite our best efforts. So let's look at David's pattern. It's a very simple pattern of response to his circumstances in our psalm this morning. And unlike some of my recent sermons, I don't have 7 or 8 points. I only have a couple. David's first response: there is a longing for God. We read it, we sung about it this morning. David has a longing for God. Sometimes our circumstances are so strong and so pressing that all we can do is just have a longing for someone to intervene. And I love all of you all, but you can't solve my crisis. We need somebody a little more powerful than each other, right? We need each other to walk alongside of us because we have these similar experiences, but something more powerful. So David turns to God. He says this: "Oh God, you are my God." He's reminding himself. "I seek you, my soul thirsts for you, my flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water." I seek you. These are the phrases that he uses. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you. And then David uses a simile. I long for God like I would long for water in a dry and weary land. You can almost feel the desperation in David's crisis. And he's expressing in this first response his emotion. I need God in this situation. I want God in this situation. Now remember that David is in the wilderness of Judah. Here's a picture of that wilderness, right? He's looking around and saying to himself, I need God in my circumstance like I need water right here, right now. And there isn't a river that throws this. This leads to the Dead Sea, basically. This is one of the reasons, this is one of the reasons that Jesus describes himself as living water. Because water is so important in this culture. It's important to agriculture. It's important to life. Our spiritual condition without God is like this wilderness. It's dry, it's dusty, right? Our spiritual condition with God is supposed to be like fresh water, like living water. And this is how Jesus describes himself in this kind of agrarian economy where they're so dependent on rain and water. That's the first response. David has a longing for God and God's intervention in this situation. David's second response, there is a turn toward God. A search, a looking. He has a longing. That's a kind of an emotion. I want God. Now he's going to turn. Where do I look? Where do I go to find God? Right? And he says, the sanctuary. So I've looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and your glory, because your steadfast love is better than life. My lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. I will lift up my hands and call on your name. If David's first response was emotion, his second response is an action. He starts to look for God, right? And Jeremiah, I can't remember the address, but it's in Jeremiah. Just read the whole book, you'll find it. So God says, if you seek me, you will find me. There's similar phrases all throughout the Old Testament. David asks himself, where do I know to find God? The sanctuary. I'll go there. When you're in this kind of situation, go to the place where you found God before. For some of you, it's the sanctuary. It's right here. Maybe some of you are here just for this moment, for this time, because you're in the same place that David is. For some of you, it might be nature. Right? I love John Muir's quote, why would I sit in church and think about the mountains when I could go to the mountains and think about God? Right? Well, both. Okay? I'm not saying the church is important. Everybody come back next Sunday. Okay. So where do I know to find God? I'll go there. What do I know about God? I know about his glory. I know about his power. And I know about his steadfast love. And then David settles right there in God's steadfast love. It's better than life. He expands. I know about his love. I know about his power. I know about his glory. And I know about his steadfast love. It's better than life. He just sits in that, right? That's a place that we need to sit. Why love? Because God has power, God has glory, but God is love. This is what 1 John 4:7-8 says. Basically, God is love. John says it. How do we know that God is love and that love extends to us? John goes on to say, God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent his only son into the world so that we might live through him. If you want to see God's love, look at Jesus. That's what John says. He should know he was around him for all 3 years of his ministry, right? And then how do we know that God's love extends to us? John goes on to say, in this love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins. That's what we're moving towards in Easter, in Holy Week and Easter, right? And David is sitting here in this kind of love. The third response in David's pattern. So we have first his expression of his emotion, the longing. We have second, an action. He looks for God. He turns towards God. The third response in David's pattern is to find refuge in God, right? He says this, my soul is satisfied as with a rich feast, and my mouth praises you with joyful lips when I think of you on my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I sing for joy. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. When David's focus turns toward God, he uses words like satisfied, joy, help. My soul clings to you. You uphold me. He uses the image of a rich feast. I don't know. I just got back from Italy. It's a land of rich feasts, right? He uses this language of a rich feast, and then he uses the language of being in the shadow of God's wings. One image is of abundance. One image is of care. This is who God is. This is how he expresses his love, abundance and care. And then you can just see David's faith building here. He's found in God something beyond his circumstances. And there's several examples of this in the Old Testament, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're getting thrown in the furnace. What do they say? God could save us if he doesn't. So we're still going to worship him. We're not going to bow down to these idols, this statue. This is a different kind of faith, right? This is a kind of faith that is not based on our circumstances, not based on the outcome of our circumstances, but based on a relationship with God through the circumstances. And then let me define faith for a moment, because this is a peak of David's faith right here in this passage. Faith is confidence. That's all it is. It's confidence. You have faith that the pews that you're sitting on will hold this whole row of people, right? Look around. You have faith, and that this is because you have confidence in the construction. You have an experience there, right? You have a kind of faith. You have faith that when two hydrogen and one oxygen molecule come together and are cooled below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, that liquid water will become solid ice. That is confidence in chemistry. You have a faith that will happen, even if you don't understand all of that, right? You have faith that I will end this sermon at 11 a.m. Right? Never mind, you don't have that kind of faith. It's 10:58. Yeah, I know. Y'all want to go out and have some hot dogs and breakfast burritos. When it comes to God, faith is relational confidence. You have a relationship with God, and David has had these experiences with God in such a way that he can have a relational confidence in God, that he will be there through the circumstances that he's going through. Finally, the last response of David in this passage is surrender. So we have a longing, we have a looking or a searching, we have finding refuge in God, and then David surrenders to God. He says this, "But those who seek to destroy my life shall go down into the depths of the earth. They shall be given over to the power of the sword. They shall be prey for jackals. But the king shall rejoice in God. All who swear by him shall exult, for the mouth of liars will be stopped." Sometimes it's easy to read Psalm 63 and stop at the good parts, right? But here David is reminding everybody and himself of the circumstances. This is not good. This is not easy. My enemies are pressing in on me. This is back to his situation. Someone is unjustly trying to kill David, and he's seeking justice from God. He wants it. Remember that this is poetry. Poetry uses language, right, to convey an idea, and this is strong language right here. David wants justice against his enemies. But because this is poetry, this isn't facts. It isn't happening right now, right? David actually is expressing something that he hopes happens. He doesn't know what will happen, but he's expressing what he wants, but he's also expressing his faith that it doesn't matter. That's what poetry does, right? There's multiple meanings when he says this, but it doesn't mean that this is happening right now. David has to surrender to the fact that he cannot exact justice himself in this situation. He's vulnerable again to even further injustices. He doesn't know if he's going to die or if he's going to make it through in this psalm. He just doesn't know yet. So he has to call on God and surrender
that there are things that he cannot control and that he just doesn't know. He has to surrender to the fact that it is God who is just, and it is God who will bring ultimate justice. It may or it may not be in this world. There are no promises of that. But there is a promise that God is ultimately, back to his power and his glory, can bring justice to this, whether it's this world or the next. David has to surrender also to the fact that there might be something that he does not know. Okay. This is David's poem, Psalm 63. It's a poem of longing. It's a poem of looking. It's a poem of refuge. And it's a poem of surrender. What we're going to do is we don't have this kind of pressure in our lives, honestly. We're not going to die because of our faith. But there are circumstances that we're all going through that are very difficult. What we're going to do is Pat's going to come up. The worship team is going to come up. They're going to play some background music, and I'm just going to ask a couple questions for just a minute or two of reflection. Here are the questions. Are we in a place that we have an existential need and we long for God's help? Are you in the place of longing right now? Are we in a place to make a turn toward God? To take a small action to try to find God? Going to a sacred place, reflecting on what you've heard or known. Maybe you don't know a lot about God. You're just here because of that. You're just looking for something. Are we in a place to move in our faith from faith in God that the circumstances are going to turn out good for us to faith in God that God will be with us no matter what the circumstances are? This is an important part for our church right now. We need to have a faith in God that God is going to carry us through whatever circumstances. It doesn't matter. God is with us. And then, are we in a place of surrender where we recognize that we aren't God and we are vulnerable? And we're going to surrender to our relationship with God. So we'll take a minute or two of reflection, and then we'll follow up and close with worship.